This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the payoff with Pete, Stories of Sobriety. We are back, brand new season. Mike H is going to lead us off. He's a guy from Philly who was like ridiculously near and dear to my heart. I really consider him like family. And he got sober right around COVID and he came crashing into my life via a virtual meeting. A lot of you guys know Murph B. Murph B is the sponsor, and now Mike is my friend. And he's also an ally and somebody who I seek counsel in a lot. And he's got a wild story. Young guy with a bunch of time already and an amazing story of sobriety. So pumped to be back. Mike Hagan is coming up. But first, Kevin Susan. All right, Mike, let's start off with give me your sobriety date.
My sobriety date is July 22nd, 2019.
And I met you. So you were sober in July, and then COVID hits and all that stuff. And then I got to know you through that virtual meeting through Murph. So when did you meet Mike B, Murph B?
I met Murph B on a Wednesday night, 3 or 4 days into my sobriety journey.
Wow. So what kind of shape are you in when you come across Murph B? Like you're in Philly, right? I guess you guys both lived in the city at the time. And describe to people, like, because some people listen to this at one day, like what were you like when you met him? What was the vibe? How were you feeling?
I thought my life was over. A big part of my identity was always around drinking. I was a couple days removed from a drink. I hadn't drank in a couple of days, which was normal for me even at the time. But after the last bender, which had happened the previous weekend, I was in a bad way. I think that might have been a 3-day hangover. Mentally, I was way worse though. Like I said, I thought my life was over.
For me, I always talk about like I was the reason I got sober is because I was just like completely feeding into submission where I was like, all right, what do you got? Like, because anything ultimately has to be better than this. I finally was open to surrender. Like, did you have a similar experience? I know your story a little bit, but it's pretty cool getting like into it like this.
Yeah, I just felt like I was beaten down. The example I give is that Sunday, I was on a bachelor party. So like, talk about a cliche final bender. I was on the West Coast. I was in San Diego, and I missed my flight out on Sunday morning, and I was drunk in the airport, like pissed drunk in the airport on Sunday morning. My friends all went with me to the airport and all got on the flight, and I couldn't even make it through security. And I had that was the longest day of my life. I was not in good standing at home, understandably, because I was calling it in the morning, literally just drunk as a skunk, and I had to take like a layover in Phoenix, and like I was sitting in the Phoenix airport, and I will never forget this feeling. I hope I never forget this feeling, but I was just thinking about my journey with alcohol, and I was absolutely petrified of what my life looked like if I continued to drink. I was fortunate I hadn't pissed it all away. I was employed. I had just gotten married 2 months prior, and I had a house in Philly, and I knew if I continued to drink, that all of those things were in serious jeopardy. And on the flip side of that, um, I was absolutely terrified of what would happen if I quit drinking and what that looked like. And that was a bad place. That was a really bad place to be.
Yo, what about and I want to get into your childhood and like because that stuff's always super interesting to me. But so how did you not get through security? Like what? what happened?
I never got all the details.
So you were like blacked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I remember where I was at 5 a.m. You know,
Yeah.
Still going with the last standing members of the bachelor party who were not flying out 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Playing beer pong with vodka and orange juice with a bunch of fellas.
All right, so let's go back to your childhood. You had a really, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn or what we're talking about, but you grew up in a nice area outside of Philadelphia, right? Like, let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Like, what was that like leading up to like the first drink?
My childhood was awesome. Grew up in a loving family. I'm the youngest of three. I have two older sisters. Had two loving parents. My dad, growing up, my dad didn't drink. I knew he went to meetings. That's all I knew. Me, myself, you know, I had no trouble making friends at school. I excelled in school, excelled in sports.
You were a good student?
Yeah.
Really? Like A's?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was prep in Philly. That's no slouch.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird. And I think that is kind of like part of the story. But like, I went to public school through 8th grade.
Where'd you go to public school? Where'd you go to grade school?
I went to Haverford Middle School.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's really funny, like, you know, booze never entered my life. And especially like with how things were, how, you know, some occasional half a glass of wine. Never saw my dad drink when I was a kid. And like I said, like I had friends, I did good in school, did well with sports. And I was, we had this thing in 8th grade in middle school, and it was called the Gold Team. And it was like basically any kid that was like a half decent kid, you know what I mean? Did okay, like played a sport, you know, did okay in school. All the kids did it. And I was elected like the president of the Gold Team, right? It's like 100 some kids or something.
You don't want to break the vault about this stuff. Oh, I know that you.
I do. So like, things came easy to me. I'll never forget. We had like a fundraiser for the American Heart Association, and like I had to stand in front of the whole school with a microphone. You know, 1,500 kids or something. And I remember that vividly. I was nervous, but like at the same time, I was like, I think I did like have confidence. You know, I had no reason not to. So I was kind of floating through 8th grade. And then, like you said, I went to St. Joe's Prep for high school, an all boys Catholic school in Philly. And that was a big switch up for me. I had one friend from the middle school that went there, and I knew some kids through like CYO basketball. But for the most part, it was like you took the biggest fish in the pond and then you threw them into this like parochial mix of all dudes. And that was a big change socially for me. And, you know, freshman year in high school, I did not drink.
Now, did you know because your dad didn't drink, was there a healthy fear around it? Or did you have no idea about that?
Yeah, there was a really healthy fear around it. I knew that alcoholism was genetic.
Yeah.
and I knew I had a lot of good things. Um, I wouldn't say I was like striving to be, I always knew that like I would drink, but I wasn't like eager to do it. Um, but if I look back on like my freshman year, like socially, I was like, I just felt, I feel like this phrase is like almost overused, but like I did feel out of place my first year in high school.
Yeah.
Because I'm like trying to fit in, trying to make friends. And I did. Like I fit in, I did make friends, but it was just like it was a weird time. I said I didn't drink. I met up in my freshman year. I met up with an old buddy from middle school, and he had a 6-pack of Yingling. This is when I'm in high school.
Yeah.
He gave me a Yingling, and I took a sip of it, and I was so disgusted. I was like, dude, I'm good. And that was the only time I drank my freshman year. I was like, that's fucking disgusting. I can't believe people drink beer. It's the first time I ever touched alcohol.
And then when did you get going? Like, when did you, because for me, one of my triggers that people phrase it ad nauseum on here, but like 8th grade, I'm terrified to go to the dance. Like, can't talk to any girl. 9th and 10th grade, I start to drink, and I cannot wait to get to the dance.
Yeah, I've heard you say that on this show many times, and I love it because that is quite literally me from freshman year to sophomore
year. Yeah,
I remember mixing. Yeah, I remember mixers at the prep when I was a freshman. I was shit scared to talk to girls.
Yeah.
I was like a little ball of fear. You know what I mean? And it was like, I think it had always been there. I think I wasn't like, it wasn't a like an environment thing fully. You just took the kid out of his natural habitat, but like there was always some like comparing myself to others, like just like I'm not good enough. Like if I look at sports, it's interesting. I played lacrosse for my middle school, but like our town didn't have a lacrosse team. So I played over in Lower Merion Township, which had like a really competitive youth lacrosse league. And it's funny, I even got a taste of this in like 8th grade. I was the best player on the team at the middle school, and I was like a rotating third line midi for the Lower Merion team. And that was actually the first time where I was like, oh man, I can't hang with these dudes. You know what I mean? And yeah, but when did it all change? It all changed the summer going into sophomore year in high school.
So what happened? Tell me that now. Tell me that, because I always say, it's a spiritual experience. That was my first. What happened?
I mentioned I have 2 older sisters. So one is a year older than me, and then the next one is 4 years older than me. So she was like just getting out of high school when I got to high school. So I went to a party with both of my sisters. We grew up going to the Jersey Shore, and we went to like a college party with my oldest sister, and we drank Busch Light, and it was everything you hear about. It was just like I loved the attention. I loved that these older dudes I was hanging out with thought I was really cool, or so I thought. They were laughing at me. I puked my brains out, and I can't remember how I felt the next day. I remember feeling like shit, but like that was it. Like that was it. It wasn't like I may have said like I'm never doing this again, but that summer I was off to the races.
What did your sisters do? Like how did they respond to little Mikey drinking?
I was the life of the party, so I don't think there was like, I don't know. I don't know what they thought about it, to be honest with you.
And it's actually when we're younger like that, like you really don't. I just know like it wasn't a big deal. Like alcohol as a kid was celebrated. It wasn't like you were doing like hard drugs. And yeah, I don't even remember that was like, I don't know. It's just like alcohol in high school was just totally normal and totally awesome. I mean, for lack of a better term, and to be ignorant, but that's how it was. Like, my brothers were brought it into my life too, like not on purpose. And I was going to find it anyways. But like you, youngest of three, the access came through my older brothers and parties and there, and it was all. It was so awesome. How about your relationship with girls? Because you go to, by the way, I was already arrested development to begin with. I was just like nervous, awkward. But at least I went to a school, not at least, but I went to a co-ed school. You're at St. Joe's Prep, which is an all boys school. Were there triggers around girls socially that led to more alcohol consumption?
Yeah, I just couldn't talk to girls. So you know what I mean? Like I had girlfriends in middle school and it was like passing notes. You didn't even like,
Yeah.
you know, really you don't really like interact with girls the same way in middle school that you do in high school, or at least I didn't. But
So
yeah,
when I was completely wasted, I started giving notes to girls at bars again. And that's a good way to almost get arrested.
that is a good, that tracks, Pete. No, but like freshman year, we're hanging out with like girls from different private schools like around Philly, and I was always very nervous in those situations. And yeah, to answer your question, alcohol, social lubricant, I was way more comfortable. I think that same feeling of like confidence that I got the first time I got drunk.
Yeah.
Like I'm the life of the party. That all came, and I was not scared to talk to girls anymore when I was drinking.
What happened to your ambition? Like, did it become like because alcohol, the moment I started to drink, whether I knew it or not, it was my motive. For the rest of my life until I got sober, like it was constantly in motion towards when I was going to drink the next. Those were
100%. My ambition, everything changed. Everything changed. What I wanted changed. I would say like when I was a freshman in high school, before I was drinking, I think like, I got pretty good at a sport. All of a sudden there's all these expectations. I vividly remember when I was like 14 years old, they were calling, like one time at practice, coach said to me like, "Oh, you are a little Hazy, like the best kid that's ever played in the program." And I was like, "Oh fuck!" Like, I went, I was like, "What happened?" And then like, boom, like there's some expectations, and my goal of being like a sports star kind of went by the wayside. Like training and like everything like that. Like I just wanted to party.
you're getting A's too. What happens in the classroom?
Not much. Not much. Well, no. My grades didn't really suffer.
Okay.
Like all through high school, I was a get buyer. I've always been good at getting by. B's, like A's, B's, occasional C's, all throughout high school.
So what are we thinking about, like moving up towards college? Like later in high school for me, it got pretty dark because I started to do like you smoke weed, not a huge deal. I mean, but like whatever. I like got into prescription drugs, like hard drugs. Like I was like, I'm not going to do cocaine, but I was putting everything else in my body. It could have killed a horse, and it actually messed my heart. But like, what kind of like gradually, what did you get into as high school was coming to an end? Because you mentioned the shore, like down the shore partying, and then like after high school, there's like senior week, and it's just a gross, out of control scene for alcohol.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I would say, so I was drinking all summer going into sophomore year. And then sophomore year when you're supposed to take the big step up to varsity, you're supposed to, like all this stuff. Like at that point, I was in with the older kids. You know what I mean? Um, and I I loved it. I loved it. So like sophomore year, I'm getting picked up every weekend by a senior and going down. We partied in a field in Fairmount Park. It was the party spot, usually 2 nights a weekend. And I'm getting picked up to go down there, and I'm
My
loving
older
it.
kid, this is the greatest feeling in the world, right? Like,
Yeah, like I made it. I made it. So like, you know, I continued to do enough, right? The sports, I continued to do just enough with school, where I get named the starter. I'm still getting good grades, and I'm going really hard on the weekends. But like, what you're doing when you're not practicing, like everything changed. Like my priorities were just totally warped, and kind of forget what the question was.
no, it was just kind of like gradually, like how hardcore did it get, or how ugly did it get drinking in
Yeah, in high school.
Like, I'll tell you like my story real quick. Like my parents started to figure out what was going on with me. Like they would find like beer cans, or they would find like, bowls. I used to write like in a journal and talk about like taking mushrooms and like smoking weed all the time. And like you, like I was an athlete, but they were like, "What is this deal? What is the deal with this dude?" And they were like, "Hey," they were kind of on me. Did you like start to feel the heat at all from your parents, from your mom? Did your dad ever grab you and be like, "Yo, dude, I know what's going on. Big Mike has experience in the field of sobriety." Did he,
Yeah.
did he grab you and try to get you straight or anything?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he tried to scare me straight. I would say he did his best to ingrain in me that I could be an alcoholic. Um, I was pretty slick in like getting by, so I thought. Maybe one parent. Um, I don't know the level that he knew what I was doing, um, but I was well aware in high school of the allergy and what that is for an alcoholic.
Were you
And
scared?
yeah,
You
yeah,
are.
and yeah, a little bit because part of me had this attitude like I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? I'm on top of the world. Um, I'm I'm throwing the parties. I'm getting the kegs for the parties in the field. I'm selling red cups. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I didn't get kicked off any teams. I had a starting spot. And like the ambition to be like a star literally was like settle for a starting role. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Do just enough for a starting role. And frankly, I think some of the pressure, I had a fear of like failing and a fear of living up to expectations. I always go back to the sport, um, but in everything, and to answer your question, like how dark it got, I mean, I cut like the summers were insane. So I'm drinking, by the time I'm 16, I'm drinking 5, 6 nights a week in the summer, um, sneaking out of the house, all that stuff. By senior year, drug wise, dabbled here and there. There was definitely, to your point, weed, but didn't really get into hard stuff in high school. But like, we had off-season workouts in the fall after school, and they were optional. And I was at the field on a Wednesday afternoon drinking with my friends instead of after school, instead of aspiring, instead of trying to reach my potential. So that was, that was high school in a nutshell.
All right. So college, I know your story a little bit. It kind of didn't last too long at your first stop. Like, talk to us a little bit about
Yeah.
Catholic in DC.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I wasn't sure when I was a senior if I was trying to play lacrosse in college. That's kind of where my career went. I was like, could go D3, but I wasn't getting any major looks because I wasn't that good, and
You certainly weren't helping yourself.
that is for damn sure, Pete. Um, and I was on the fence. It was either go to Penn State, and half of my grade was going to Penn State. Most of my friends were going to Penn State, or go to. So my oldest sister had gone to Catholic University. I obviously had visited there when I was in high school. I was familiar with the school, and I could have played lacrosse there. I was on the fence between those two schools. I was like locked in to going to Penn State, but I was shit scared to go to Penn State. And the reason I was scared to go to Penn State is because I visited Penn State. I knew Penn State's reputation. I knew what the partying was like there. And by this point, 18 years old, 17 years old, I knew I didn't drink like a normal person. And I made the decision to like kind of pull out. I don't remember how far along, but like I had my roommate, a good buddy of mine.
At Penn State, you were like in a room with this guy, like you. And
no, it was a good friend of mine. It was like, all right, we're rooming together, like send our shit in. And I backed out.
Oh, wow.
And I chose to go to Catholic.
Those were just like little alcoholic things, like not following through. You know what I mean? Like leaving people hanging, like not working through shit, right? Like, and so you go to Catholic, and then what happens when you get there?
So I go to Catholic. My dad drives me down. The first weekend is orientation for freshmen. It's the end of August. That summer, I had a senior house down at the shore with my friends. I'm planning to play a sport in college, regardless of where you're playing. Should probably like get in shape. I spent the entire summer drinking like every day with my friends. No preparation for going to college and potentially playing a sport. I was going to play there, and so my dad drives me down. Instead of rooming with a friend, I roomed with a random kid. He was not like me at all. And I met him. And then I called my friends. A couple of my friends also went to Catholic. And it was the first night there, Friday night. We did the orientation stuff. And then I knew a bunch of older guys that I used to party with in the field that were currently students there. So I obviously got in touch with them and got to their house for a party off campus. And it was like high school all over again. It was like being the young kid, the life of the party again. I brought a bunch of my friends from high school and also, a couple of guys I had just met down there to this party. Stayed really late, did a keg stand for really long, felt like I was the man, felt like I made it, I'm in college now. Then went back to my buddy's dorm, which was near the party. And, memory's a little hazy at that point, but I have been filled in on the details. And I walked into an RA who was patrolling the hallways in the dorms. And I guess he asked, where do you live? Like, what dorm are you in? And my dorm was like across campus from this dorm. And he said, go back to your dorm, get out of here. And I don't really remember that. And the next thing I remember was I was laying on the ground, and a security guard, I remember like his security card, like a university security guard was like shaking me. I was on the ground. I was just
people don't know Catholic University is in DC, which is we're not talking about like, Irvine, California. This is like hard scrabble, tough, can be dangerous.
Yeah. So anyway, I got woken up by this guy, and he It was really nice. That's what I remember. He was super like sweet, and he was just like, "Oh, where are you staying? Oh, it's right over there." I tried to swipe into the cafeteria. It was probably like 5:30, 6 in the morning. It wasn't open. I got back to my dorm. I walked in, and my roommate, who was like a Boy Scout, um, was like absolutely petrified. I think I took a piss in a sink and passed out. And
Oh,
the next morning, I was hurting and called my friends. We went out to breakfast, recapped the night before, and I was hurting, and I couldn't wait to just go take a nap in my room. And I get back to my room after breakfast, and there is a note on the door to go see the dean.
okay.
Uh, and I am real hungover and probably smelled, oh God, so bad. And so I went to the dean's office, and it was weird. Like, I met with the dean, and he was like, "What'd you do?" He was like, you know, interrogating me, like, what did I do last night? Where was I, etc. But like the whole, like, the end of the night was very hazy for me. So I didn't like really like get what was going on. And I said, I was like, I went to a party and then I went back to my dorm. And he was like not saying a lot. And then he was like, all right, well, and there was a couple other kids in the dean's office too. It wasn't just me. And he said, we're going to ask you to leave campus for the weekend for the rest of, and you're going to miss the rest of orientation. We take, violations like this really seriously. And I didn't really understand what the violation was that I was, accused of. And he didn't really say. Um, and he just said, you're going to go to your first week of classes this week. You'll be allowed back on campus on Sunday afternoon, and we'll meet with you on Friday afternoon after a week of classes. So I had to call my dad that Saturday morning and say, hey, you can't go home yet. I explained to him what happened. He was very confused, I think, disappointed, a little bit angry, I think. He had just sent his oldest kid through that college and was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So I stayed up at a hotel with my dad in DC that weekend. I went to my first week of classes at Catholic. And I was just scared shitless. I was like, well, what is happening?
Yeah, that's cool. When you're literally the active alcoholic waiting for the others to drop.
Yeah. And like,
welcome to adulthood, Mike. Like, yeah. Adulthood being an alcoholic. Like,
yeah. And I never got in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were no consequences for my drinking in high school. Like,
yeah, me neither.
I skated under the radar really well for what I was doing in high school. And so I went to meet with the dean that Friday afternoon after going for a week of classes. I thought I was going to be on, like probation or something. And he brought me into his office and he asked me again to recap what I did that night. I said I went to the party. I said I went back to my dorm. He told me, well, we were a little curious, so we looked into this a little bit. And you got written up by an RA in Spelman Hall at 2:30 in the morning, and you didn't swipe into your dorm until like 6:30. So what happened in those 4 hours? And he just asked me, and I was like, oh, here we go. Because I didn't know that they knew that I passed out or anything like that. And he asked me what happened, and I just told him again. I was like, I don't know. I went right back to my door. Not sure. And he goes, okay, well, we checked your swipe card activity, and you also tried to swipe into the cafeteria in a half an hour before you got back to your dorm. So where were you? And I was like, I don't know. And he was just
like blacked out. You really don't know, right? Yeah,
I didn't really know. Like the whole security guard thing was really fuzzy in my head. So I was just like, I don't know. And I was like, He's like, all right, well, we checked the security cameras. You were passed out in the law school parking lot for 3.5 hours or whatever. And I was just like, okay, you got me. You know, here's my wrist. Slap him. Like, what do you want here, dude?
Yeah.
And that's when he dropped the hammer and he said, we're going to suspend you for 1 semester. So I need you to call your dad, tell him come pick you up. We'll go through a process. If you choose to come back next semester, whatever. And I like blacked out. I was like, what the fuck? So I left that meeting. I was crying. I called my dad. Can't really remember his reaction. I was like in shock.
Yeah.
But he did what he always did. He showed up for me. And I could like that. It was like disappointment, anger. Like I could just feel like I was like, oh fuck. Like,
you gotta get all your shit out of your room.
Yeah, that shit. I got to tell all my friends. I'm like dating a girl. I had to tell her. Drinking was a problem.
So that's a major consequence. So what happens after that? Like thinking through. Obviously, you talked about when you hit bottom, but between like you leave college after a day, that's kind of like not great on Catholic either, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, it's an easy resentment. So
yeah, that's a fourth step for sure.
The RA, the dean, you name it, the institution, you name it.
Yeah. So what happens to your life? Are you just adrift from that moment until? I mean, obviously, you meet a wonderful woman, you get married. Like you're like my brother Michael says, who's sober. Like you kind of got by on a handshake and a smile for long enough.
Yeah.
You got charisma. You're a good-looking guy. People. It's funny. Like you can say, like honestly, like you mentioned, like there were no consequences. You had an amazing childhood. It's like our buddy Clint B says, like born on third base, thought you had a triple, right? And you're still kind of able to move and groove through life. But what happens to you? Are you just totally adrift in between, like that moment where you get booted from Catholic, and then before you finally get sober?
Yeah. Well, my dad came to pick me up. I said my goodbyes. We went home. There was definitely some talks about the disease of alcoholism on that drive home. I went to my first AA meeting when I got home. I went to a meeting, the Villanova meeting.
Day 31 at Carroll?
I can't remember if it was at Carroll or Villanova.
It's probably Villanova by then. What year was this? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was 2006.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So my dad brought me to a meeting. I don't remember one thing about it. I do remember thinking, I don't belong here. What are these people talking about?
Yeah.
I'm just a dumb kid who made a dumb mistake. And it was like this. That was when it started. It was like, I don't drink like a normal person. And I cop to that all day long. Then I knew I knew from the time I was 16, I didn't drink like a normal human. But to your point about a handshake and a smile, it's like, I can still do all that.
Yeah.
And it was a weird time. I had to enroll in community college. I didn't go back to AA after that. I eased off.
Go back to drinking?
Yeah, I eased off on the drinking. I eased off on the drinking for like a semester and really picked and chose. I started smoking a lot of pot. I was going to community college, delivering pizzas. You know what I mean? Shout out Piece of Pizza, Rosemont, PA.
There you go. Yeah. You need
good tips over there. And it was just like a real foggy.
How often did you go to Hope's?
Nah, good amount.
Hope's is the ice cream shop next to Piece of Pizza. Okay.
I mean, and it was just like, kind of just gave up on the dream of playing a sport in college and was like, trying to figure out what was what. And at that point, I was like, I think I have to go to school. The geographical thing. It's like, I think I have to go to school closer to home. I think that would be good for me. So I ended up transferring to Temple University the next semester. I obviously elected not to go back to Catholic. There was a big, like, yeah, I'm not going back to Catholic. I remember, this is a little off subject, but the day I got the boot, I remember calling the cross coach. And I had talked to him previously that week leading up. And he was really cool. And he was in my corner, really sweet guy. And he was just like, "Are you going to come back?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I never followed up with him. I never like stayed in touch with him.
Yeah.
I just
And,
like,
and isn't that like a thing that's typical? Like, and then that is like snow on the roof. It's another thing to like drink over. You know what I mean? Like, not that you drank over, but it's like, oh man, like, that's a shame. Like, because everything you tell me is the exact opposite of like how you build self-esteem, right? All the shit happening, you're not really working through it. You had an opportunity, like I did many times, like the door opens to an AA meeting and you're just not ready. And thank God you got to that through that bachelor party, like alive, right? Thank God you met Kate. How did you meet like Kate?
are we fast forwarding through the college years?
Well, let's go through. Let's take me through the college years. Yeah,
I won't make it as long. And we're back.
Chapter 3, the college years. All right, so talk to me a little bit about college. Like, how you mentioned Temple. I mean, I do want to get to your lovely wife, that union, and how that helped you out. And then, of course,
for sure,
3 beautiful daughters in sobriety and people like River, you know? So let's go.
For sure.
Talk
Good stuff.
No.
Yeah, so I went to Temple for a year. I started that January. I roomed with a good friend from high school. You know him as John F.
Fish was your roommate?
At Temple. Yeah.
Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite snowboard dudes of all time, the Great Fish. Okay.
Yeah. So Fish was my roommate at Temple.
That's a good guy to walk down a dark alley with in North Philly. I'll tell you that much.
He was always a good one to have in your corner when the gloves came off. We had a habit of going into parties and stealing the taps off of kegs from trap parties at Temple, and so there was a lot of drinking.
How about you?
And a lot of weed.
We taking Adderall? We doing coke? Like, what do we do?
A little bit of Adderall. I never really danced with coke.
Smart man.
I knew a lot about coke, and I knew a lot about myself. And for me, that was like one of those things that it's just like, would I do it? Like occasionally, yeah, if it was like offered to me, but like, a man's got a line, right? It's like that line. I knew I knew how I felt about coke when I did it, and I liked it, and it scared me. And I thought, like, I don't think I can pull off this deal if I'm buying coke. So that was like always kind of something that stuck. But yeah, the Adderall was definitely in there. A lot of weed, and just I loved drinking. I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it. I really did.
You're such. Look, I'm not trying to be a doctor because I'm the same way, dude. For some of us, when I drank, it's in my freaking blood. It just is, dude. I see it all throughout my dad's family, and no regular person reacts to alcohol in their system the way that I do. It's just
100%. 100%.
You're one of those people too. All right, so go ahead. So
we end up in a house sophomore year
at parties, and
we end up in a house sophomore year. Had a bunch of parties there. There was a fight outside one of the times I was involved, and like randomly, Philadelphia licenses and inspections. Like, it was crazy. Like, we had this party, the cops broke it up. We didn't think anything was like really happening, and this is like, I think, the end of. I was there for like a year. Yeah, a year, and And one day we just came home and there was a sign on our door that said like, fuck, like, is it from Philadelphia LNI? It was like, this house is like, you got to be out of here. I forget what the sign said. I have Fish has a picture of it. So it was like a Friday night.
By the way, your second doomsday note on your door.
Yeah, dude, something about those notes on the door, right? And like we had to like move out like in 24 hours. And I was just like, you know what, this isn't working for me here. Like it's just like trouble. I was just like, I need another change of scenery, but I need to be staying in Philly because I was scared. I was scared of like, just like Penn State. Like I was scared if I went far away, like what would happen. So I didn't get like kicked out of Temple or anything, but I started the transfer process and I transferred to St. Joe's University. You'll never believe it. Like
the portal again.
Yeah, I hit the portal again. At this point, I played club lacrosse at Temple, and I mean to say that I was doing nothing for my like physical health would be a massive understatement. But I transferred to St. Joe's. My other sister, who's a year older than me, was at St. Joe's at the time. I felt like I had a good base. I knew a bunch of kids that went there from high school, and I was like, that'll be good for me. And I went to St. Joe's. I actually tried to walk onto the lacrosse team. I showed up at a tryout, did some things good. I think I went to like 2 days of the tryout. I know I didn't make the team, but I was like rolling in like hungover. You know what I mean? Like I was, maybe if I make the team, that'll get me straight. Like I had no idea. I was just like a lost soul, like real lost soul. But like same thing, partying regularly. The grades always, I always did okay.
Well, I can't believe how smart you are. Good job. No. Yeah, let's call what it is. I mean, like you're getting wasted all the time. You clearly got something going on up there. You're sharp.
Right. So there was another consequence at St. Joe's. I was driving home from Manio to my house, which was over near campus. Short 10-minute drive for the listeners. Short 10-minute drive from. I was at a bar. After party didn't work out, and I was like, I'm just going to go home. So I went to my car, and the next thing I know, I'm being woken up by the Lower Merion Police Department. My car was in park. I was at a red light. This whole waking up in places I shouldn't be, that kind of became a common theme also. I just had a habit of drinking so much that I could not stay awake any longer. And that was really tough. At that point, that was a hard phone call home for the pickup from the station, and nothing changed. Nothing changed. Ended up getting prescribed Adderall very shortly after that. Don't want to get too much into it, but like there was some fear in my family of me getting prescribed Adderall. Yeah. But I convinced everybody that I really needed it.
Of course you did. Yeah.
I abused it heavily.
Nothing like that. Nothing like the end of that conversation. It is like when you're an addict, convincing people, even if you really aren't convincing them, but if they're going to allow you to do it because they just are exhausted fighting, the moment that you get there, like throwing hands up or whatever, it's like winning the Final Four. Like literally, I can remember like that is the alcoholic. That's the sick person that like when you convince your mom that you still can drink control, or your girlfriend that you can do that, or that you can take Adderall like normal people. It ain't happening, Captain. Not for me. Like it never has. And it's wild that like we go on these campaigns to like it's so sick.
So sick. It's so sick. So I graduate. I graduate. I go have one more summer down the shore. I'm still spending every summer down the shore. That looked like the previous, 8 summers or so.
How long did college take you? 4 or 5 years? 4 years?
I think like total 4.5. Yeah. And I graduated is 5 years total. Yeah, 5 years total. Spent one last summer down the shore. I had a marketing degree. I like the show Mad Men. I was smoking a lot of weed. I thought I had this like creative, gene too. I convinced myself I was going to be the next Don Draper. My oldest sister at the time was working at a advertising agency in Philly. Got the shoe in for an internship there, which started right after the summer after I graduated. And I started there in September after another summer of just absolutely like abusing alcohol, drugs a little bit, but alcohol. And I was working in a bar, you know what I mean, down at the shore, Whitebriar.
Really?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
I was the door guy. I was the guy that checked IDs.
The Whitebriar is a good place to have a really good time if you are drinking alcohol down the shore.
And I was. I would sit at the door and I would, be sipping, whatever, vodka soda, whatever I wanted that I would mix in the back. Obviously, you were not allowed to drink on the job. And I was one of my best friends worked with me, so we were working together. He's not one of us, but he's like a little brother to me, and I certainly was not a good influence on him. He lived right next door to me down the shore, and yeah, so I started. I was like, snap out of that, and I'll go to the real world. I started in September at this new job, the internship. I was doing pretty well. I shut it off, right? I was like, all right, I'm going to be a weekend warrior now because that's, I knew I couldn't just go out and have a beer after work. There were work happy hours where I got too drunk. There was one incident in particular, very early on in my career in advertising where I helped plan like it was like a fundraiser for a nonprofit client. And I remember there was so much stress and anxiety around like that like the event and its success and everything, and having to socialize with people in an environment like this, which I wasn't used to. I was used to drinking my face off. I remember, I think I ordered like 2 doubles at the bar. And that night I woke up in a subway. And I was late for a meeting the next morning. And I remember it was like my boss's boss pulled me aside and was just like, this is your one get out of jail free card. And that cannot be happening again. And I was so scared, so embarrassed. I was like, I think I was in some clothes from the night before. It was really bad. But yeah, back to your question. That is when I met Kate.
Oh, really?
During that period of my life is when I met Kate.
That's right, because this is the company. No way. Was that your father-in-law that pulled you aside?
No, it wasn't.
I was about to get up out of his chair.
So my mother-in-law and father-in-law both ran the company. So it was the boss's daughter for those doing the mental math at home. And
it was worth the roll of the dice. It worked out, dude.
And she was a little bit different too. And I'd be remiss not to say, she's like this really dynamic, hard worker, full Italian. and absolutely no bullshit. Like, and that was one of the things that attracted me.
Basically.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, like, yes. And she's no bullshit, so might be good.
Right. So how was she with you? Like, what kind of response did you get with your drinking from her?
Yeah, not. Um, I wouldn't say positive. Um, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think, and alcohol was a problem. My alcohol use was a problem pretty early on in our relationship, and and like part of again, I don't want to speak for her, but like when I drank, I had superpowers until I didn't, right? And I was very charismatic and could be the life of the party. And to an extent, like, yeah, maybe I was more fun and funnier and good guy to hang out with. You know what I mean? And not every single night I drank, I was waking up in a subway.
Yeah.
Or like
those were the nights that I hung on to. The one night where I had 2 glasses of wine and had a nice night with my significant other at the time, whoever that was.
100%.
The most dangerous part, I remember there was one time I was over in New York, and there was one night I went out and did blow and didn't do it all night. Went home, cleaned up my apartment, and fell asleep and had like a normal day. I hung on to that every time I did coke from that point forward. Maybe it'll be like that one night. It never will again, ever.
Yeah. It was almost like every time we went out, it was like a test.
Yeah.
And like if nothing bad happened and I didn't get too drunk and I didn't black out, it was like, pass the test.
What kind of life is that we led? I know exactly what you're talking about,
I mean, like at that point, I'm just trying to convince myself that I can drink and maintain a relationship, a career, a job, all of those things. And that went on for a while. And like, we're trying to keep our relationship like
biggest consequence with Kate, where you were like, this is it. She's this woman who I'm married now, or maybe you're engaged at the time, or is going to drop me like a bad habit because of this stuff.
I mean, she should have dropped me like a bad habit more times than I can count. A couple of years after we started dating, my parents got divorced. I was sick. My parents got divorced when I was like early 20s. Like pretty soon after we started dating, maybe a year or so. And that did a number on me, though I couldn't process it.
You were drunk?
Never really. Yeah, like I'm either I'm drunk or on Adderall or like just putting myself like blocking it out, doing whatever I can to like block it out, not doing a good job processing it. I was tired of like the pressure of dating the boss's daughter, and I really, at that point, I knew I loved her, but I was also just scared and just like, I don't know, the family stuff did a number on me, and I was like, I need a fresh start. So I quit my job, and my dad's best friend, he's an uncle to me, owns a couple bars out in San Francisco. So I quit my job, kind of like ended it with Kate, and I moved out to live with my uncle and work at his bars. That was like,
where'd your dad? I keep getting us hung up on this stuff, but it didn't show. What the hell did your dad say? His alcoholic son is going to move out with their, you know what I mean? Like it's clear, like what we got going here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he thought I needed to get away from it. Maybe he had mixed feelings about it. I'm going to stay with his best friend, and that was probably really, really comforting. But I just had to like get out of town. I was there for 3 or 4 months working at the bars. putting in job applications, literally just like, and then going home. I wasn't even drinking a lot at the time. Um, and I was just like, what the hell am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing? I wasn't getting a job. I felt like I ran away from everything and everyone at home. And it was like this, it was a true like quarter life crisis. I was like, what the fuck am I doing out here? I just like woke up one day and I'm in California. Like, and like the only time I was drinking, it was like, oh, if they had a party or like, what, grab a 6-pack and drink a 6-pack of Lagunitas, like by myself in my aunt and uncle's house. Like it was just a really weird time. And again, I'm not processing any sort of feelings. There's a lot, there was a lot going
When you
on.
were out or did you know you had a drinking problem and you were trying to like kind of chill? Okay.
Yeah, I did. That was part of it too. Of course, working at a bar. Again, I never drank when I was working at that bar. Like I just never did. I had to drive a long way home. And like, it was a really weird, like cloudy time in my life. So long
Well,
story
it's similar, I can relate to that. It's like it's a new job, a new opportunity, and like whatever it is, like that change of scenery. Like they do say, wherever you go, there you are, and I believe that. But like,
yeah,
take a minute. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would always show up and keep my shit together, usually for the first like 2 or 3 months, maybe.
yeah,
But then ultimately, I'm showing up. The addict, the alcoholic, the junkie, the person who's gonna, for me, steal your shit and help you look right over here. Yeah.
oh yeah, 100%. And like, I just carried on this thing that like, all right, like life's weird. Like you don't have a job, don't drink a lot. You know what I mean? I remained in touch with Kate during the few months I was out there. She came out to visit, and I just realized, what the fuck am I doing? I'm in love with this girl. I don't have my shit together at all. I don't have like a real job at that point, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go home. I'm like, I felt really guilty being away from my parents, my mom especially, and it's just like time to go home. Packed up my stuff, drove home in like a week. I was just like, I'm out of here. And came home.
A lovely, wonderful, beautiful person and woman, and a member of the Eagles cheerleading squad during the Super Bowl 15 run in New Orleans. I think we got to get that out in the open because that's what.
Shout out MB, absolute saint. Shout out MB.
So your mom. So then that's a really good point too. We haven't talked about your mom much or your sisters, but like we're constantly keeping everybody up and we don't really give a shit. When we do, at least again for me, I can just shut it down with more alcohol, more drugs. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's a great point. Yeah, I can say with certainty my drinking and behavior was the cause of a lot of sleepless nights, and rightfully so. I wake up in subways. I wake up on City Line Avenue behind the wheel of a car. I wake up on a bench. You know what I mean? In some random city, and it's like what are you doing? And again, I tried to like masquerade, right? I just tried to be like, yeah, I like to have a good time sometimes, no big deal. I end up moving home because I don't have like a job. I like really chill with the drinking. I move in with one of my best friends. I'm waiting tables, trying to get a real job, and not doing much else. You know what I mean? Kate like didn't welcome me back with open arms. Nor should she have. I didn't have my shit together. I was a lost puppy, and end up getting a job working for Comcast, and worked there for a few years. There was no major consequences there. Happy hours, what have you, and end up getting like back together with Kate. And the drinking was like a pretty in check, and it required so much effort from me to keep the drinking in check. Certainly had bad nights. That the roommate I had at the time worked for a large corporation and drove a company car, and we were out together after like playing golf one time, and he had the company car. and I was drunk, and I I drove. I took his keys. I told him I needed to call Kate or something, and I took his keys and drove it back to our apartment, drunk in his company car. That didn't go over too well. And, like just constant, like so many stories like that. And
It's funny because we mentioned like when people get sober, I love what you said. It took so much work to keep it in check. And not only that, but it's exhausting because like when guys will come in, like new guys, and one of the things I could always remind them of what it was like for me was like you have this pie chart in your mind that's been dominated by alcohol. Am I going to drink? Am I not going to drink? How much am I going to drink? When I drink?
yeah,
You know what I mean? I drink, so I got to stop. It's really all you think about. I mean,
yes,
or that pie chart, it's 75 to 85 to 95%. And like when you stop, it does clean that off the chart. Like, okay, alcohol's out of the equation. Now, how am I going to live my life without it? And
yeah,
by the way, hang in there because you'll be shocked to see how great your life gets. It's like
yeah,
30 days and we'll refund your misery.
yeah,
Like that
yeah,
is, but I love when you mention that, like that it takes so much effort just to like try to drink controlled. And oh, by the way, you're never going to pull it off if you're a card carrying drunk like me.
yeah, 100%. And I proved it so many times. And like, just like fast forward a little bit, I'm working in like digital advertising. I leave Comcast for a startup. Kate and I had moved in together at this point. Um, can you hear that?
Is that church?
No, can you pause it? My refrigerator's.
Yeah, got it.
Actually,
All right, we're back. Mike, let's go. We got to get to the sobriety. Mike just got into a fight with his refrigerator.
yeah,
You unplug it?
yeah, I unplugged it and plugged it back in, and she's purring softly again. That was sounded like Kevin McAllister's, like furnace in Home Alone. That was insane.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like I said,
right.
Yeah, let's do it. Got into digital advertising. Absolutely hated it. It was doing well, like doing pretty well. I hated the startup. I left Comcast for. But again, it's like I'm kind of like a weekend warrior at that point, and I've been living with Kate for a couple of years. I was in love with her, and she was, I got really good at saying I'm sorry for my drinking escapades, if you will, and I started. I made the decision. We have a family business that I think my dad never.
H&A.
H&A, baby. My dad never wanted me to get into it. I was so shot with like advertising. I wasn't like banished from. I quit. I quit the job. I convinced my dad to let me work for him, and my first day was January 1st, 2018. It was a totally different industry. I needed to learn it quick, and I did. And I started doing like pretty well. I picked up on it quickly, and like again, my drinking isn't like out of control at this point. But like life is getting real, right? I was in my late 20s. Been with Kate for a long time at that point. And like, I'm deservedly so. It's like, starting to feel some pressure. Like, okay, am I going to marry this girl? Am I like situated enough to marry her? Like financially, this, that, the other. And so I worked there for a year, not even a year. I proposed in September of 2018. And we got married in May of 2019 which actually worked out really well because
you mentioned at the top. Okay, you were saying because COVID was coming, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned I want to come back to this. You had asked like the biggest consequence of my drinking with Kate. One big one that I also don't ever want to forget Um, it was leading up to our wedding. We were getting married in Mexico, and I had a work golf event. I work in insurance, and it was it was a golf event on a Monday. It was like a week before the wedding, and I told myself I'm going to go. I'm going to network, as the professionals say, right? Like I'm going to meet some people, drum up some business. I'm still. I was over in Jersey somewhere, and I blacked out. I blacked out drinking at the golf event, and I called her after. This is a week before she's set to marry this guy, and he's blacked out on a Monday afternoon. I don't think it came as a surprise, because every time I drank, it was like you're rolling the dice. Like you got to black out and embarrass yourself. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. On this particular day, on Monday, a week before her wedding, stressful enough. Her fiance is calling her blacked out on a Monday afternoon. That night, I went home, and then I had to. She said get out, and I had to go sleep at my dad's house. These talks about the disease of alcoholism were pretty constant from the time I was 16, and they just looked different, as I got older. And my dad never really pushed me like into being sober. I mean, he had a million gifts from sobriety that, if I wanted to, I would have seen, but I didn't want to see them. I thought, frankly, dude, I thought like I'm not a cokehead. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a cokehead. I can carry on the charade. That's kind of what I was telling myself towards like the end. And I said I was sorry again the next day, and I convinced her to carry on with the wedding, and we got married a week later in Mexico. Might have been 2 weeks. I think it was a week though.
Wow.
And Mexico was the most beautiful wedding you could ever imagine. Our best friends, our closest family, all flew down to Mexico. It was a giant party.
How did you keep it alive?
I blacked out, couldn't walk the first night, the like welcome drinks. I blacked out. And I tried to hold it in check for the what do they call the night before the wedding? For dinner. I kept it in check. I'm still pretty hungover, so I kept it in check then. I definitely let it rip the night of the wedding. Somehow didn't black out. But
did you get Adderall or anything?
Night of my wedding, I don't think so. One of my friends probably had it and gave me one. Maybe that's
right. That was good.
Yeah, taking Adderall does it. Now that you ask that, I'm thinking about it. I remember I woke up drunk the day after my wedding and went surfing with my dad and like two of my best friends, and the party just continued. Kate loves to have a good time. She's not an alcoholic. She loves the events, the social like setting like that. You know what I mean? She thrives in them and it really loves them. And I did my hardest after the first night not to completely ruin it. So that was May of 2019, and I got sober in July of 2019. As life got more real, getting married is a big one. New career. My name is on the door of the company I'm working for. It's like, it was a lot to handle for me. And I found that, like, even though I wasn't drinking every day, I was drinking more. And it took more to get me drunk. And the more I drank, the worse I felt. Um, and it was almost like it was stopping working. And I was just like, I wasn't drinking to be the life of the party anymore. I was just drinking to make like anxiety go away. And like, frankly, that didn't start until I was like consciously. Yeah, I think I'd been doing it since I was 15, but I just didn't realize it. And, you know, I continued to pick and choose for the next 2 months. Went to a buddy's bachelor party in Montreal. Uh, I didn't do anything like, it was just like the hangover that day. When I got home, I was shaking like a leaf. Um, I just felt so bad.
It's so interesting when you're at that point in your life, by the way, because you're in your late 20s, right? At this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like there are all these events like bachelor party where drinking is the focal point, but not everybody's an alcoholic, but you
Yeah.
are. So you're getting like it's just a whirlpool, and everybody gets sucked in the whirlpool and suck everybody else with you. But these events are whirlpools. Like, oh, it's another opportunity for me to get wasted or to try to keep my drinking in check, which usually always ends poorly, especially like the big event because there's a lot of days with alcohol. It's just an odds thing, right? You're gonna lose. Dude. Play the odds. The alcoholic's gonna have an awful night out of like 4 and an all-inclusive drinking event.
Yeah, exactly. Where drinking is the focal point, and like where your no bullshit wife's not around, and you can just drink with the boys and just as much as you want. So that was like I guess in June, and then in July, I felt really like shitty after that bachelor party. Like physically, I was like, dude, I cannot be doing this to my body anymore.
By the way, people see me laughing. The only reason I laugh is because I love Mike to death, and he's sober, 6-7 years now, whatever. So
like at this point, I know I'm an alcoholic. I know I'm an alcoholic, but I had a lot of friends that drank like I did that were having a lot of success on paper, and I wanted to be like those guys. I can drink like them and work like them, and have this beautiful life on paper. And that was my goal. I was striving to be a functional alcoholic by that point. And this is I'm early 30s at this point. And I'm aging myself. But so July, I guess 18th, somewhere around then, another buddy, a high school and a college friend, both St. Joe's, St. Joe's High School, St. Joe's College, had a bachelor party out in San Diego. And Kate, I think, had something that weekend also. And I never talked about my bachelor party. Yeah, you can imagine what happened on that. I passed out on the golf course.
All right, so this is where we started, the San Diego bachelor.
This is where we start. This is where it starts.
So you go to that first meeting. What happens? What happens to your life? What do you start to do differently that enables you to stay sober and be in a situation where you're talking to me now, almost 6 years later, where you've got 3 beautiful girls, your wife is able to continue to conquer her business, right? And continue to have great success because she's not at home right now. She's in New York doing what she's out. And you just finished up a day doing what you do, but you're home alone with the girls. Like that does not happen. There are no girls and there's no responsibility for you to keep drinking. What happens to get to this point?
Yeah. I'll back up to day one, Monday, after that bachelor party. Missed my flight, was supposed to be home whatever time, got home at midnight. And my poor wife realizes she married an alcoholic who has made so many empty promises about drinking, has copped to being an alcoholic, has tried every remedy in the book, no liquor, no pre-gaming, you name it. I tried to do it. and I just continuously failed. So she's like, understandably, like a mess. Um, and I got home and I like broke down and I was like, I can't do this anymore. That day in the airport and on those flights was so brutal. And I talked about like just that fear of like getting sober, but also what would happen if I continued to drink. Because yeah, I had proven to myself, I had proven that like I couldn't do it. You know, my goal.
You see, like, were you guys both crying and stuff? Like, very.
I think she was. I think she was like just so disgusted and probably horrified. Like she just like hugged her in the head, you know, like it convinced her that he would like figure it out, you know, whatever it is. Again, I can't speak for her, but I can only imagine how she was feeling 2 months into marriage, you know. And I walked into the office the next day and I walked into my dad's office and I sat down. And I could tell by the look on his face, because I'd seen it a million times, what I looked like after a hangover was bad.
Yeah.
And I was very, very, very hungover that day, that Monday. And I said, I think I need to go to AA. I can't do this anymore. And he said, do you want me to take you to a meeting? And I said, no, I'm going to go by myself. So I went to a meeting that Monday night and media.
No shit.
There was like a young people's meeting.
Yes, sir.
And I saw a kid I went to middle school with. I hit in the back. I heard a lot of people talking about stuff I couldn't relate to. There's a lot of drugs I couldn't relate to. There's a lot of rehab, sober houses, all this stuff I couldn't relate to.
So you're comparing yourself out. So you're still holding on for dear life.
Yeah, it's basically like, I felt the same way I did when I was 18 and I went to a meeting. I was just like, this is weird. I had proven to myself that I couldn't drink like a normal person. And I proven myself so many times that when I drink, I'm rolling the dice and something bad can happen. And I didn't go to a meeting the next day, but I went, we were living in the city at the time.
Well, you didn't drink?
I didn't drink. No, I was just horrified. Honestly, I was just like I was in a paralyzed state of fear. So I go to another meeting down in Philly later that week. I shared. I said I had a bachelor party last weekend, and I'm really scared of what's going to happen. You know, I got honest. I was like, I'm an alcoholic. It gallops in my family, right? Like you say. And I was convinced I was an alcoholic. I still thought everybody was weird. Then this dude comes up to me after the meeting, and he's wearing like a golf shirt. I like to play golf. Seems like a normal cool dude. Talks like me and my friends talk, and he's just like made a joke about how I was feeling like shit or whatever. But he seemed cool and he stuck around to talk to me. And he asked me, he was like, just keep coming. And then I think the following week, he asked if I wanted him to be my temporary sponsor. And I was like, this is the only cool dude I've seen in an AA meeting, right? You know? So that started it. And I remember everything, all of a sudden I remember everything. Like my memory of the early days of sobriety, they were brutal because I wasn't ready to fully do this thing. I still had this thing, like, I'm not like all these people. I just have the allergy. I don't drink like a normal person. Once I start drinking, it's hard for me to stop. And then it ends there. Aside from that, I'm a normal guy, right? Handshake on a smile. And
you got a job, you got a wife.
I had a job, I didn't lose it.
You have a question rate.
Yeah, I mean, it had been such torture for Kate because, I had mentioned, I didn't embarrass myself every time. I was a good time a lot of the time when I was drinking. until I wasn't, right? So it was like this whole shift. And like she needed to like, it's not like we're gonna stop living our lives, right? We had like 6 weddings in my first 6 months. And like it was just like it was really tough. I didn't I didn't call my sponsor a lot. I went to 1, maybe 2 meetings a week. And I was just filled. I was filled with fear.
What was that?
As Siri started talking.
It got
And
you get all these weddings, but and by the way, so Murph came up and talked to you.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I didn't see
talk to you.
I didn't seek him out. He started bringing me to a meeting on Saturday mornings in Philly. He would encourage me to go talk to like guys with a couple of days. I managed to build together like a couple of months.
And no one was already. He had just gotten engaged, like literally right around that time.
Yeah, it was like right around that time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this dude's got the world by the balls. I want to be like him.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really like, I wasn't eager to take suggestions. My story is probably told this, but like I liked what came easy to me. I was do just enough guy.
Yeah.
Not go above and beyond. And I realized that like you could take the booze out, but you're still the same guy, right? And like, I remember we went to a wedding out in LA. I was like 3 months sober. And I would call him when I had weddings and be like, dude, this is fucking sucks. And he would tell me like, try and make someone's night better. Start with your wife. Then find somebody who's not pissed drunk and talk to them. I didn't really take that suggestion because all I was thinking about was myself.
I get that.
Yeah. And I would get like club soda on the rocks. I didn't really tell. I told like maybe 2 or 3 of my closest friends that I was going to quit drinking, and that was it. So I was like, drinking a virgin vodka soda at these weddings. The meeting, he suggested I go to a meeting in LA, and I had 3 months at that time. I was restless, irritable, discontent, horrified, you name it, just totally in my head. And I remember that meeting because I related to the speaker, and I went up to him after, and I didn't have a habit of going up to people after meetings. And I just said, thanks, man. I'm in town for a wedding. Like, your share really helped me. I related to it a lot. And, the light started to come on a little bit. I'd be remiss if I said, like, if I didn't say, I had gambling was always a thing with me, and I didn't quit gambling when I quit drinking. And it was almost like I was substituting, the gambling just got like out of control really quick. And I didn't tell my sponsor about it. I didn't tell my wife about it. And instead of like, I just like needed to not think about being sober. And it was like, oh, let me just bet on sports. And, I'm not drinking, so that it's okay, And can't be our job of smiling.
I'll pause it. You sneezed twice hardcore, so we took a break.
I appreciate that.
By the way, can I tell people I'm gonna promote this as like that with Austin Butler, and we'll get a lot of eyeballs on it. So hold on. So Mike, this is important because the gambling is so relatable, and it's also when because I had talked to Murphy about you. You are as guys, you do it today now. You get a new guy on the line, and it kind of reinvigorates you. And your connection with sobriety. I mean, and tell me about you. And then I never met you, but the gambling thing was like, dude, you had like bottomed out, and whatever that looks like for you with your gambling, and you were honest with them. And it was so interesting because to you it was like the biggest deal in the world, just like I'll stub my toe tomorrow and that'll be the biggest deal in the world for me. That's kind of what we are sometimes, right? But like he and I were like, I was like, dude, as long as this fucking guy doesn't drink, he's gonna be fine. Like this is it happens when you get sober. And you told him, you figured it out, and you didn't get.
I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him willingly.
They can't make you tell him.
No, it came. It came out at home. I had been hiding it, and it came out at home, and I got kicked out of the house again. Uh, Probably 7 months without a drink. Um,
I think you
and I gambled. I bet like I drank, right?
Right.
I bet like I drank in excess, and I had been going to meetings with him. I had been talking to him, not enough. I hadn't been fully honest. He didn't know anything about the betting, I don't think. Um, and I went to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting the following day, and it was and I ran into somebody that knew Murph after that Gamblers Anonymous meeting. And I called him after that meeting, and I remember that phone call vividly. And it was, Murph, he's like super low key, not like, he was the exact type of sponsor I needed, because if I had a hardcore sponsor who pushed the 12 steps, the big book, AA on me, then like I would have been out the door so quick. And he wasn't like that.
Yeah.
But when I called him and told him about this gambling thing, he said, like, dude, you have like two options here. And like, one option is to start doing this thing the way we do it, or you're going to drink again. And 2 months later, that was like right around the Super Bowl, so like mid-February. And then like a couple weeks later, COVID hit. And the Zoom meeting started, the AA Zoom meeting started. We were living in Philly. And like, my life didn't get a whole lot better when I quit drinking because of who I am. And I always thought that like my disease ended with the drink. I thought when I quit drinking that like everything would come easier to me, and that I would be a better husband, a better worker, all this stuff. I wouldn't say I was. And I wasn't taking direction. I didn't take the steps seriously. I grew up Catholic, so I thought like, oh, yeah, I believe in God. Like, all right, cool. I'm all good on the God steps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I met you on the Zoom meeting. I met other guys who had what I wanted. Careers, families, but most importantly, had just this way about them, even though I'm looking at them on a computer screen, that like they were just like chill guys and like not rattled. You talk about like wearing life like a tight shirt. Like every time I drank, all that tension and like build up, and it was big like compartmentalizer and like blocking things out, like, and like anxiety, like all those things that like I didn't even think I had those things, but when I drank, I felt like a different person. And it's because it made those like feelings, right? Feelings that I've talked about from the time I was like, 13. It just made them go away.
Yeah. And that becomes, for me, that's my coping mechanism. So I don't develop any of the stuff that regular people have an opportunity to develop, simply because they're not getting wasted all the time. You know what I mean? Like, and so like we're way behind schedule most of the time.
Yeah.
Drinking,
Right. So, I began to share really honestly about how I was feeling on those meetings, on those Zoom meetings. Right. Yeah, you heard them. I was really angry. I felt like I was just getting I was working. COVID, didn't really affect my job too much. I was able to go into the office because we have a small office, but I was just, I was angry. Certainly wasn't a good version of myself. And, I wasn't reaching my potential. I wasn't reaching my potential as a human being. And
That's a great point. Like to be able to tap into that now. At the time, it's hard, but like you get sober, you get special because of the gifts that we get from this program and the ability to help other people. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
And like I would have guys like set me straight on that meeting, and I'd be like, "Fuck this dude. He doesn't know what I'm going through. He's rich."
Was there an instance you can remember? Pretend you don't have to say the guy when you shared something and somebody kind of did the friends meeting crosstalk, whether it was after or during.
Yeah.
Was there? Do you remember a particular instance?
Yes, I do. I was very upset about something, and um, I just thought life was like unfair, you know, and I wasn't thinking about my wife, whose new husband, was like newly sober, but also not changing, like just a dickhead. Probably more of a dickhead because he's not drinking anymore. Not probably, definitely. And I don't know how to deal with it. You know what I mean? Because I've always dealt with it from drinking. I've always quieted the anger, resentment, insecurity, fear. I've always quieted that with drinking, and it always worked until it didn't. And I had two guys say something to me on a meeting after I just let it rip. I remember I was sitting in my car, and they both told me something that like I didn't. They told me that they related to me, and that they knew exactly how I was feeling. But like these are the guys that I'm like, no, dude, you're like chill. Like you seem like life's just like you're just floating through life. You don't know how I feel. But then they told me like, no, like we were exactly like you. And I had respected them. I really I respected them at that point. And then I think it finally started clicking, you know. I can't continue to live like this. You know what I mean? Because I'm just gonna fucking explode at some point, you know? And slowly, I've never been a slow learner type of guy. And I started to see these guys were exactly like me and had the same problems I had when they were drinking and in sobriety, and they like got through them, right?
It's so interesting you say that because like I've heard people say again, you hear all the cliches, but they're true. And we just share them with one another after we steal them from other people. But like, I wish you a long, slow recovery, right? I've heard people say that. And that's really like, that's recovery. It's not like you may have the pink cloud and you may feel good. I hate the pink cloud because I think, we are happy it's dry. But like, if we play it right overall, but it is hard. I mean, it's not easy. It takes a minute. What did you start to do that helped you break through to like that fourth dimension and where you're now, where you are now? We all have shit.
Where I'm enjoying the gifts of sobriety. Yeah. Well, it was a few months into COVID. I had gotten to know guys on this Zoom call, and it was my 1-year wedding anniversary. So my wife and I went down to Charleston. COVID restrictions were more lax down there, so this is like the prime of COVID, and like many times I called Murph. I had never called another alcoholic who was like in the program, who I had met at a meeting or knew from Zoom, and we're 2 months into it, and I'm talking to the guys like 4 nights a week on a computer screen. I never took Murph's advice to like call people or seek out a new guy or just like engage in any sort of like fellowship. Like I wasn't here to make friends. I'm good. Murph, you're cool. You don't drink. I'll try and listen to some of the stuff you say, And I was down in Charleston. So I'm a year married, almost a year sober, 10 months sober or whatever. And Kate and I were meeting up with family, a couple who's our age, who I love. And, I've drank with them countless times. Always a good time. And I was really uncomfortable because I hadn't told them I wasn't drinking, and we're down in Charleston, and it's our anniversary, and life had been unfair. Like this woe is me thing. It's like always a thing with me. And I called him up, and he was like, he's like, I'm going to give you a suggestion. I want you to call another alcoholic, and I did. For the first time in 10 months, I called somebody other than Murph in the program. And that was you.
Yeah.
And that was the first time you and I had gotten to know each other on the Zoom a little bit. And I just laid out, I remember where I was walking. Like,
I remember where I was too.
And I just told you, like, I want to drink. I want to drink, this has been a good run, but I want to drink. And I was honest with Kate too. I was like, I'm really scared. I'm really nervous. And I don't remember what you said to me. I know you made me laugh. And I knew I was like, this guy's a fucking man. Like,
why?
He's like, he doesn't drink. Like, I'm just like, kind of, it's all like, my closed-mindedness was like, wait a sec,
I was dating a woman at the time who had stayed over, and you called, and I honestly would have answered because I liked you. But you go, oh my God, it's like a Saturday morning. You go, I can't believe you answer. And I stepped outside and I go, don't worry, dude. I got a girl over here. I'm trying to impress her. So let's talk about sobriety and let her think I'm helping you. So we got a good laugh out of that. We talked. I remember that so well. And I'll throw it back on you because let's do the Mutual Admiration Society for a second. So fast forward like a month or a year and a half after that, or 2 years after that, I was in this relationship with this woman who was just like, it was not good for me. And I many a time, you're a night owl, and so is Kate. So there were times when I was totally screwed, and I was like, Hagen will be awake. I can actually call someone right now because I'm driving around downtown Austin, ready to drive off a cliff in the hill country here. And I would call you guys, and you were funny. We would laugh. I would tell you about some instance, and she would be next to you in bed, and she would just like you said, straight shooter, unadulterated. And that was like a real safe space for me to go, like to talk to you. And that's how I really got to foster a relationship with you about stuff that was going on in my life personally, because like we're never cured. And like, so it goes from you're the guy with 7 months trying to get a day. Now I'm the guy with 10 years, right? Trying to figure out how I'm going to like keep living myself. It's just amazing, right? How this whole thing works,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it, dude. It's like, I was like, I wanted to do sobriety my way. And like my way got me kicked out of the house 7 months sober. You know what I mean? And I was a miserable human being. I was ready to explode at any moment. And that phone call to you was like a big step into realizing like if I want what these guys have, I need to do stuff that like I don't want to do. And
Yeah.
And that kind of started it, dude. And I was like,
And by the way, listen, like that doesn't change. You constantly have to develop that muscle where it's like, because I hated hearing you got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, but you do, and it gets way easier. And then that muscle becomes a reflex,
Yeah. So like, I don't drink in Charleston that weekend. We hang out with the fam and end up having a great time. And like, dude, I never hung out with this guy and his wife, I think, like not drinking. And I'm still very much like, insecure and fearful about it. And when I told him, it was like, I remember it was like, we just had a conversation and I was like, it's been causing me a lot of problems, and it was like, say no more, dude. You know what I mean? And like, I'm still very, very, very close to him. And like I had to get comfortable. I didn't mention I was the best man in a wedding 6 months. So right before all this went down, just so filled with fear, I had to give a best man speech. Just like I didn't enjoy it. One of my best friend's weddings, and I took direction to be of service, and I tried to show up like the best man should do, and that got me through the wedding. And that's what Murphy told me to do. But like, fast forward, okay, like keep getting to these Zoom meetings throughout COVID, and I start to hear things, and I start to do the steps with Murph. Murph lived like 4 blocks away from me, and then like before I know it, I'm like actually work. I'm actually like I feel like some relief. You know what I mean? And it's like
Where did you and him go through the big book?
uh his rooftop, his rooftop in Philly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um that's where I did my first step on his rooftop. Um and like slowly but surely I started to get some relief. I still was like, okay, I'm doing enough. You know what I mean? I'm getting a little relief. And then I was like, okay, I make my way through the steps. I'm starting to feel good. And I think it was him that told me this, but maybe not actually. But he was like, go to meetings until you want to go to meetings. And I never wanted to go to meetings, but like, the Zoom meetings were incredibly convenient, and I'm all of a sudden, I'm talking to a bunch of guys that I like, who I respect, who are doing this thing the right way. And it's just like, okay, got like a little crew here. And, there wasn't a lot of social temptation in general for those first few months because COVID.
Yeah.
And slowly things got better. To the point where it's like, all right, I'm working the steps. I'm starting to feel relief. I'm starting to like see this life without shrinking, right? I get more comfortable going to weddings. Um, I'm not thinking about getting drunk. I'm just like, it's just like, it's better. And I'm still dealing.
Was there a point where, by the way, like where you're like, man, I can do like was there a moment where you were having fun around people that were, imbibing, and you're like, man, and you're like, man, this is like, I'm having a good time without alcohol. That to me is one of the best feelings ever. You know,
It is a great feeling, dude. It is a great feeling. It was probably over a year in when I wasn't thinking about drinking.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about somebody judging me.
it takes a minute. I remember it was like, I've been sober for like a year and a half, I think, you know?
Yeah, that's probably like where I was where I first felt it.
Yeah.
So I felt it last weekend. Just absolute vibing in Las Vegas. I wouldn't recommend this to somebody with no sobriety.
6 years, you know what I mean? Like, that's hey man, you're entitled. Like, as long as you're spiritually fit, right? I mean, like, you go there and honestly, that's it. If we are spiritually fit and we're working this program, there is no fucking place we can't go with the singleness of purpose. Now, it's not now, and that's the beauty. It's not. I don't feel any pressure to shut the bar down. I will literally go home, and people are like, "Where are you going?" I'm leaving. And you have that comfort in your own skin where you truly don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. Like, and people respect you when you do that stuff because they can tell somebody who's sober and has that self-esteem and has that glow. People are like, "What's this guy got?" And that is what a corner to turn. And you are sharing like that you had more of that this weekend.
Yeah, and like, and we adopted Penny in April of COVID. So like a month into this Zoom life and getting a little bit more.
Penny's a dog.
Penny's a dog. And it's crazy because I like started to realize that like I had gotten by with like no accountabilities for so long. And like I didn't realize that like again, it was always like handshake and a smile. It was like I always just got it. And I thought when I quit drinking that like that was going with it. You know what I mean? Because I did. I built an identity around being like the fun guy at the party. And I did that when I was 15. And I never realized that like how far removed from being a real person I was until we adopted that dog. And then all of a sudden it's like I have this little creature who's shit scared of everything. You know what I mean? Who's depending on me to like, I'm accountable. It sounds terrible to say. It's like I didn't think that way about marriage, and like I was just like I
Because
was
the wife, honestly, can take care of herself. Like she
fucking
doesn't need you to exist.
so right, and that's so true. Um, and she would thrive without me. Uh, all right, so you fast forward a little bit in the sober.
Yeah, let's fast forward a little.
I'm,
We're
st-
only
I'm,
31
st-
hours.
I know. I'm starting to like this thing, right? And like COVID gets lifted, and Murph's like, dude, like you've been doing this a long time. Like you got some stuff to give away. And
Yeah.
like I would get comfortable talking to a new guy, and the new guys would come on this Zoom meeting, and I would reach out to them, and then I would talk to them, and like I would feel so much better after talking to these guys.
Yeah.
And it was something that I just like completely blocked out early on. And it was like, wait, this is actually helping me a lot, you know? It just like, I don't know, maybe an early phone call to you helped when you and I were just getting to know each other like by the phone. Like we talked a shit ton during COVID.
Yeah.
And like, and so I got linked up with some newer guys, and you know, all of a sudden I'm taking guys through the steps, and that was a wild time. We moved out of Philadelphia. Um, I had a lot of fear, insecurity, all that stuff about moving out of Philly, and we moved out of Philly at the end of 2020. So I was what, 2 years sober, but like really, like probably had like 9 months of really like 9 months to a year maybe of like working, like really doing this thing. And I leaned heavily on AA and that. And what I mean by that was like I was scared to take a jump. There was a lot of, uncertainty around moving and buying a nice house in a nice suburb. And I made a couple phone calls, and I talked to guys, and I talked about what was like holding me back, and this and that. Like, it's just so funny how it works. Like, talked to Fleck, and it was like, I remember that phone call. You know what I mean? That was when I made the decision, okay, we're going to buy this house. And he was just having, an important conversation with a guy I sponsor a couple of nights ago about like a big life decision. And it's like, that's how it works. So, yeah, I realized that talking to newer guys actually helped. And, I started to take guys through the steps, and I watched a lot of kids approach it like I did. And, I wanted them to not make the same mistakes I did, because the only thing I did right was not drink, like in the first year. And I saw a lot of guys go back out, and there would be feelings of like, shit, I'm a bad sponsor. Maybe I don't have this thing, thinking about myself, still thinking about myself. But every one of those like conversations or going through a step or whatever it was, like for me, I had to give it away to get it, and it wasn't until I started taking other guys through the steps where I was really understanding everything on like a deeper level and really trying to like practice what I was doing. Yeah, like practice what I was saying. Go ahead.
So we're gonna wrap it up with fatherhood. Okay. So
Let's do it.
I remember exactly where I was. I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, when you told me you were pregnant with your first daughter. We'll keep the names out of it because these are little kids. Right. But what about like you have 3 beautiful, healthy girls who you are, I'll say it for you. Anybody that has been anywhere near your orbit, you are an amazing father. Like the gift that you are giving away to these girls that has been given so freely to you through other guys, right, that you've talked about. Like, I'd love to hear you share a little bit about fatherhood, but would ask you to keep it to under 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm getting a little too long-winded for you, Pete.
Mike, I've never gone this long with anybody. That's how much I love you, because this is super interesting and super inspiring. Like a couple moments ago when we were talking about recovery, I had those things that happen, like when you're waiting, when you're working steps with the sponsor or sponsee. It was like there was a white light moment. So
Yeah.
you gotta go.
We talk about it, right? And
Yeah,
that's what keeps us sober,
yeah,
And then all of a sudden we're talking about it, and then we start living it. And
yeah.
yeah, to answer your question real quick, I would say what sobriety has done for me. First, I'm going to say as a husband that I'm still so far from perfect on that front.
Yeah.
Uh,
Go there.
but there's the accountability factor. There's the looking in the mirror factor. There's the keeping my side of the street clean. Like all these things that I never did. I never realized I didn't do them. I always thought because I held the door for people and,
Huh.
you know, handshake and a smile, like all good. Like I just thought I was a good dude, you know? And I didn't realize that like this disease is so much more than alcohol. And I commonly used phrase, but like alcohol is but a symptom. Like it took me well over a year to realize that like alcohol was not my problem and I was the problem. And my way of thinking is the problem. And I drank about that like a long time. I drank to quiet the problem, and it worked until it caused me more problems. And, still very much a work in progress on the husband front. And, but like the more I do this stuff, the more I'm locked in. I had to redo the God steps and reform my idea of God. Um, the more I do it, the better I am. I'm showing up and it's like the best possible person in my household that I can be. And on the fatherhood front, yeah. Um, it's crazy to me that I have kids. It's crazy to me that I'm still married. Um, we didn't plan to have 3 kids in 3 years. We did. And uh, oof, I don't want to get choked up here, Pete. Yeah, the love that I have for those kids, and like those kids have seen me they've seen me get angry, and they've seen me be not the best version of myself, right? What this thing has taught me is that yeah, I can clean that up. I can show up. I can be reliable, dependable. I think as young as those kids are, 3, 2, almost 1, I feel like I'm a constant presence that they can depend on. And like, that's it, dude. Like, I didn't really talk about this, but like, I grew up with great parents. And like, it was always like, I didn't really have my dreams and goals defined, but like, I knew I wanted to be a dad. And the thought of me being a dad as an active alcoholic is fucking terrifying to me. It is such a gift that my kids have never seen me drink. If I continue to do what this program, like I like going to meetings now. I feel better when I go to meetings, right? I always have, but I used to not want to go. Now I like going to them. But like, if I continue to do this, like those kids never have to see that part of me. And it's I mean, talk about it's pretty easy to be great. It's absolute chaos in my household most of the time. You probably can't see all the toys and
That's why I see some of the stuff. But it is cool. It is cool. Like, it's like the calm after the storm right now. You get to like dig in and
yeah.
share your journey, and it's
Yeah.
it's quiet there. You're quiet right now, and it'll be chaotic tomorrow. It's just like
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow morning it's gonna be nuts, dude. But yeah, it's just like, I got to this point by like doing what was uncomfortable and what I didn't want to do. And I had to realize that there's a second part of step one. Yeah, I'm powerless over alcohol. I could have told you that when I was 17, no problem. But like, my life is unmanageable in my head if I don't do the rest of the next 11 steps. You know what I mean? If
Yeah,
I'm
and
not,
I appreciate how you've talked about that. Like, as a reminder, like alcohol is but a symptom. I got one more question for you. It's like a little psychoanalysis here because it's interesting. You
yeah,
grew up. You mentioned your dad being sober and
yeah,
going to meetings. So you grew up in like kind of a warm household, I would imagine. And now you're providing the same exact launching pad for your kids. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah. Um, it is pretty cool. It's awesome. I mean, it's awesome that my wife can go to New York tonight and like not worry what the hell I'm doing at home with the
Yeah.
kids asleep. You know what I mean? It's awesome that, you know, I can go to her brother's bachelor party in Vegas. Talk about vibes, impeccable vibes, and she doesn't need to worry about me embarrassing her brother, embarrassing her.
Yeah.
Um, I can come home and be like, I was very tired on Sunday, but I can come home and be a somewhat functional human being, and get to a meeting on Sunday because I needed to. I know what I need. I know what I need to do, and it's just a matter of doing it. You made this point earlier. It's like muscle memory.
Yeah.
Do it until it becomes like natural.
Dude, well, that's what you said about what Murph said. And I heard a guy say this when I used to live in fucking Monroe, Louisiana, and I was sober. This guy's Stunny. He's no longer with us. He used to say, he asked his sponsor, how long do I have to do a meeting? And the sponsor told him, until you want to.
Yeah.
And like, that's it, dude. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I might have got that one from you actually, but yeah, dude, it's like it's a life. I, I I could never picture. Like, I always thought I would have reined in the drinking by the time I had kids.
Yeah.
Just like scaled it back. Um, and that was never going to happen. My drinking wasn't getting better. And yeah, it's just like this is everything I ever wanted. Now, my own head can convince me at any given time that I have the biggest problems in the world, and that's part of this disease. And I talked to you about it. I talked to Murph about it. And
That's why it's a daily reprieve. Like, we never graduate. We never graduate. And I noticed that about myself. The more, and I was saying this to maybe you or Murph or another alcoholic recently, like, I just have to every day, like, remember, like, I've got to turn it over and start all over again. And what a fucking humbling acknowledgement that is. It's like, 100%. For whatever you've accomplished, so I have a successful career, a beautiful wife, 3 wonderful, healthy young daughters. But like, it starts over tomorrow morning, dude. We start brand new with the clean slate. And the potential is unbelievable to work off that clean slate. It's like, just, dude, somebody was saying earlier, John Wooden, like, every day you have an opportunity to make that your masterpiece. You know what I mean? But for us, it starts with turning it over to God and being like, yo, reporting's are dating. Like, what do you got for me?
Yeah, exactly. And the second I start listening to my own thoughts, it's like a game over, dude. Like, I'll find something to be pissed. It's not like I'm going to go pick up a drink tomorrow or that day or whatever, but it's like, it's in my nature. I will find something negative, and I can't explain that, and I don't think that'll ever go away. But like, that is my first thought is always negative, and it's like what this program has taught me is just like find the fucking blessings, like I really didn't think I was ever gonna have fun again, like when I quit drinking, and it's like, dude, I wake up every day in a beautiful home in a beautiful town with 3 healthy kids and a wife who loves me. And if that love wasn't proven over that love story I just told, like, geez, come on, and it's like, I have 2 choices. I can count those blessings and just turn it over, or I could just listen to my sick thoughts, and it's like, I have the tools. I have the tools, and I truly feel like I can do anything if I just continue to use those tools. and don't listen to myself, you know? And the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous is when we get jammed up, when we get stressed, I have 20 guys in my phone that I could call on any given time who I know would answer. And I could talk about what I'm going through and they can get my fucking sick mind back on track. Just like I've done for other guys. You know what I mean? That's just how it works. Shout out Riv, dude. Riv, guys, that guy has kept me more sober. It's a guy I sponsor for the listeners. But
River, you can look him up. His podcast is on here.
He was fantastic on this podcast. So proud of him. But what that guy has meant for my sobriety and my life, and again, giving away to take it. I was it's incredible. It's incredible. And yeah, dude, I wake up every day and I'm in the middle of life beyond my wildest dreams. And then somebody shits or steps up or fucking pulls their sister's hair and it's fucking chaos. But I can show up the best version. I don't get too triggered about anything. You know what I mean? And it's just go with the flow. And certainly you're gonna have your moments, and everything's tough when they're this young. But it's I can be that dependable guy that my family can rely on. And that is something that I could never say if I was still drinking. I wouldn't have a family. I wouldn't have a wife. But yeah, it's a miracle is what it is.
Well done, Mikey H.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.